So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Academic Career Pathways Clinical Education Leaders Series webinar. It's hosted by AOGME's Residents and Fellows Council, which is the RFC. My name is Dr. Linda Logan, and I'm the chair of the RFC, and I'm going to help facilitate this session.
Sorry, guys, I was unmuting myself. My name is Dr. Marie Jones. I am the Vice Chair of the Resident and Fellows Council, and I will also help facilitate this session. So before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping notes that you can see on this slide. So the webinar is currently being recorded. In about 7 days, it will be available to view or review on the AOGME website, and the slides will also be available at that time. If you have any technical issues during the call, just make sure you put it in the chat feature, and we'll be sure to help you with that to remediate those. And then if you have any questions or comments at any time during the webinar, please submit them to the Q&A feature, and we'll do our best during the webinar to try and answer them either in the chat feature or, if time permits, at the end of the webinar.
Awesome. So I'll go over the goals now for this webinar. And this webinar features 2 panelists, one current chief resident and one recently graduated chief resident. This webinar will highlight benefits of serving as chief resident, describe what a chief resident is, their roles and responsibilities in this role as chief resident, and highlight required skills and characteristics that you need and will use as chief residents. Ultimately, identifying pathways to becoming a chief resident in the future. So we'd like to start off with introductions and thanking our panelists today who've joined to speak with you and share their experiences and their perspectives and advice on how to become a chief resident. So if we could start with introducing yourselves, starting with your name, your specialty, your position or PGY level, and where you've trained in your institution. So we're going to start with Dr. Smith.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you. I'm Cassie. I'm a 3rd-year family medicine chief resident in Chicago, well, just north of Chicago. I'm at Northwestern's Lake Forest campus, so just north of the city, where we see patients at their hospital, but also 2 other clinics. A little fun fact about me is I have a dog, and she might be screaming a little bit because I closed the door on her, and I'm very sorry. Her name's Donna Meagle, just like the Parks and Rec character. And she's a beagle, so it rhymes and makes it great and everything. So glad you're here, and hopefully we can answer some questions for you.
Thank you. And then Dr. Mateno.
Hey. Hi, everybody. I'm Rosemary. So I am currently a cytopathology fellow, PGY 5, at the University of Vermont Medical Center, which is where I also did my residency in anatomic and clinical pathology. I don't know, I also have a dog, but I am clearly at work right now, so he is not here. But his name is Ruben, after the sandwich.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. So we're going to start off with some panel discussion, starting with question 1. So this question is, why did you choose to become a chief resident? And Dr. Mateno, do you want to answer that?
Sure. All right. So, there's a lot of work that goes into being chief, but I think as you go through your years in residency and you have chiefs, ahead of you, you see kind of things they do. And for me, I had a lot of ideas, seeing how they did things, and some things I liked, some things I didn't like. And, as you can imagine, so I started residency in 2020. So during COVID, a lot of things changed and shifted to accommodate for the pandemic. But by the time I was in my 3rd year, we were starting to maybe try and transition back and bring back things that were gone. And, we had a lot of changes happening. We had a new program director coming in. We had some changes to our assistant program directors and curriculum issues. So I really felt like I could be a good representation for the residents and kind of a voice for them during all of these changes happening. And so that was really what motivated me to apply. Although I feel like anyone in my class could have done a really great job. So that was my reason.
Dr. Smith?
I love that. I think kind of just to echo, to be an advocate for change, I think for, contributing and leaving something behind at your residency program. I've learned so much in the last 2.5 years and have much more to learn in the next 6 months before I'm off on my own. But I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I've been given and want to be able to contribute to the years to come. I think this is a really great time in medicine where there are a lot of opportunities to update programs and create really quality standards for current residents. And as we learn to advocate for ourselves, this is a great opportunity to find that leadership role. I find comfort in being in a leadership role. I'm very much a forest person, not a trees person. So this is kind of where I'm able to, find my comfort, but then get to engage with everybody and contribute. And there goes my dog, sorry.
Awesome. Thank you guys for those answers. So moving on to our next question. What are some of the benefits that you see serving as chief resident? We'll go backwards this time, so we'll start with Dr. Smith.
Yay. Benefits. I think the networking is a really great opportunity. I know that, I've had opportunities to meet with and go to really unique events, representing our program through the hospital system, whether that be up north in Lake Forest or downtown in Chicago. I've also had a lot of really cool leadership development opportunities through different conferences that my program has sent me to, specifically for leadership development. And also just like the satisfying, where I'm able to fix problems that I've identified. I love to challenge the system, and it's been a really rewarding spot to be in, to be able to actually see changes that I want made and get to be that person that really leads those.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think, honestly, very much the same. I think we had such a great opportunity with a new program director coming in as well to have maybe like more of an impact than a chief resident normally would coming in. But we were able to really implement a lot of interesting, changes to the curriculum, as well as these social events, other little things we wanted to do. That, we got rid of like autopsy call, for example. And I think it's just really rewarding to see an idea that you have. Like, I think this is something I know residents are, upset about or, interested in, and changes they're looking for, and actually being able to play a direct role in driving that and seeing that and, the outcome of all of that. I think as well, me personally, naturally I'm a more introverted person. I'm kind of like I'll just get along with everybody, whatever. But it really gave me an opportunity to grow in terms of leadership in my career, like in a professional sense, being able to stand up for, the things that I felt were really important, and learn how to, in a professional setting, collaborate with, superiors, as well as, my co-residents. And it really, I said, I really think broadened my experience, just, in my confidence in these sort of awkward or professional situations. And then from a very practical standpoint, this was definitely like my experience as chief did come up in like fellowship interviews. And I think, being able to balance the responsibilities of chief on top of, your normal like things you have to do as a senior resident and teaching and everything, it shows your abilities to take charge and be involved and still balance everything. So I think it's a desirable position, at least from like a CV standpoint. Not that that should be the reason you pursue it, but just it's a practical benefit as well.
So if you go to the next slide, these are just some kind of general benefits that I think our panelists highlighted pretty well. Some programs will give you a financial stipend or bump. For example, specialties like EM that have shift work can sometimes give you shift reduction, but also just awareness that certain specialties like internal medicine, your chief year is typically an additional year. So you're also kind of pseudo faculty. So different programs and different specialties have different benefits and different opportunities.
So I guess this is a pretty like broad question, but simplify what a chief resident is. And we can start with Dr. Smith since Dr. Magee just answered.
Yeah, so I would say a chief resident is kind of the middle person between your faculty and your residents, advocating primarily for your residents, but getting to, be that point of communication in order to, um, provide development and progress. That way, we can have like really great productive conversations. Providing that resident perspective is really important because, there might be incredible intentions from our faculty in instilling some sort of new education opportunity, but it just might not be received the right way, or we might not be getting out, as much as what we want. And so we can kind of tweak it a little bit. And so it's a really great collaborative role in order to ensure that there's good communication and everyone's having the best experience they can to best utilize our time. I think that's always a really big part of the struggles of residency is time management and making sure that the time that we are spending together is really quality time, and versus having those opportunities to step back and not necessarily be working 24/7. And so I think, yeah, it's a communication, connection kind of responsibility, very administrative. And that I think varies at different programs. Some programs it's on the chiefs to develop a schedule, and at my program it's not, because our program coordinator is just the greatest person ever, and so she does that. And so it really can vary based off of institution. And so I think, as you anticipate applying to residency programs, or as you navigate your current one, like really understanding that role before you get into it. That way, it's the right thing for you.
I love that. That's great. And then Dr. Matano, what do you think your definition of a chief resident is?
Oh boy, I don't know if I have like pretty much, yeah, exactly all of that. You're kind of like in a middle management kind of a situation. Sorry, they're like vacuuming outside. Um, but you're kind of finding yourself in this interesting position. It's like a middle management role where you have this very unique perspective of both what's going on with the residents and how they're feeling that the faculty are, removed from. From their point of view, they might think like, oh, this is a great idea, but they're removed from the practical reality of every day as a resident. And there are things that they don't consider and don't realize are happening. Particularly, in my specialty in pathology, we have a bajillion different kinds of services that we have to rotate on. And unfortunately, it was my job to make that schedule. But, so there's things that come on different services that your attendings may not be aware of. And so because of that, you're in this really unique position where you have all this information from both the residents, but as well as kind of like insider behind the scenes information from faculty and operations that you may not be able to share with your co-residents. And so I see it as you are kind of the observer of all with, you have to try and create the most successful academic year you can. With kind of communicating and being able to work with both faculty and the residents. Like was said before, it's a lot of administrative stuff. It's a lot of, so soft interpersonal skills, things like that. So, there's a lot of facets to it. And it also depends on the structure of your own specific program, like what the chiefs do, or if there are multiple, or how those responsibilities are divided. But overall, I see it as you are the resident representation, but you are also kind of there to help ease residents into like other like bigger program wide decisions, because the point of the matter is you want to make the best year for everybody you can equitably and the best way you can. So yeah.
Awesome. And so here are some of the definitions, overviews of chief resident, just kind of summarizing exactly what our wonderful panelists already spoke about. Okay, our next question is, what are the roles and responsibilities of a chief resident? So we'll start again with Dr. Smith. What would you define as some of the roles and responsibilities?
Literally almost anything. I think it kind of varies week to week. And very much so with the season. So like at the beginning of the year, it's really just like setting goals for the whole year and kind of seeing what, you know, the concerns that, you know, I might have had or my co-residents had, you know, over the last couple of years, and collecting that information to then be able to really hit the ground running. We had a lot of leadership development, you know, activities at the beginning, but we're partially responsible for orientation. And so, you know, giving tours, you know, getting people oriented as far as, you know, logging onto our Epic and getting that optimized for workflow. But then, you know, we have a little bit of a lull, and it's kind of more like keeping the vibes up for a little bit. Fortunately, we have a separate academic chief. So she's responsible for all of our didactics that we have, which I'm really grateful that that's kind of a separate responsibility. And then like my co-chief and she and I, we worked on like getting rid of 24-hour shifts, and we successfully did that. So our program no longer will have 24 starting in January. And kind of just like taking the feedback. We do regular chief check-ins once a block with our co-residents. So about every 6 weeks, we obtain feedback from our staff and our faculty at all of our locations that we can share with our residents, but then also we want that other feedback back from the residents to see like what our next little projects are. What else do we get to do? We are in charge of like, you know, thanking our MAs and nurses on their days, and every other day, honestly, because they deserve it. And attending a lot of meetings. I learned that was kind of a big part of the role, is there's a lot of meetings to go to between faculty and staff and hospital leadership. Just going to those and retaining all that info and dispersing it as needed. But that's really just, and also just creating a culture of like, you know, vulnerability and transparency, and learning how residents best receive feedback, best receive, how this change is going to happen, because, you know, the higher up the national org said, you know, we got to change something, and like requirements are different. So how we can like easily and smoothly introduce those things. So yeah, it's been a lot of, and then there's a little bit of like HR moments in there too, but it could be literally anything day to day. And random like Jeopardy, that's a really big thing too, is coordinating Jeopardy if someone calls out sick. I think that's kind of the bulk of you never know when you're going to get called for that kind of thing.
What about you, Dr. McKenna? What are your additional roles and responsibilities that you see as chief?
A lot of the same stuff. You know, so it is also going to depend on your program. But for us, it was pretty much like anything and everything could be on the chief's table. So that's why like learning how to delegate is a really big deal. But for us specifically, you know, we needed to, you know, it does go by season, like what's going on. So like early on, our focus was creating the call schedule, creating our rotation schedule, which is really hard because it's 13 different types of rotations across 16 residents. And it was like insane. But and then on top of that, like welcoming the incoming residents who match in March, and you know, participating in all of the orientation activities, trainings, anything like that, you name it. We found out last year, like so we have Epic training, but like as if you're pathology, you use a different version of Epic, and like nobody was around to train anybody on the lab portion of it. And so we had to do that. And then, you know, you kind of move in this summer, you know, we plan social events, graduation, teaching awards, things like that. We coordinate and try and figure out how to do all that. And then recruitment season is a big one, with the, you know, application season, interview season for residency for, you know, the current medical students. That was a big undertaking. So for us, that was like conducting like meet and greets on Zoom, participating in the interview day, and, you know, ultimately like sitting in on those decisions at the end of the year, and creating our rank list. But like some other just general things, you know, like scheduling a bajillion meetings, like figuring out like backup call and rearranging rotations as things come up or people need to go on medical leave or things like that. And another thing we were really part of was kind of curriculum updates and changing and, working with faculty and creating a lot of surveys to kind of get feedback. I think when we had our new program director come in, she really wanted to see like, hey, let's find out like the state of the program. So that was a big part of our role. And then of course there's, like as previously mentioned, like HR things, like interpersonal things that you need to like kind of talk to. I think an important role though that you have as a chief, you really want to make sure your residents are comfortable enough with you that they can come to you with concerns because, and you want to cultivate that you're trustworthy and, you can keep their information private and be supportive when need be to help them navigate because, residency is really tough. And you just, want to be a resource for them as well. In addition to all the like administrative stuff, you kind of also want to be there as like a support person, just you just want to make sure everybody's having as good a time as they can. So,
Awesome. That's all super, super helpful information. Thank you both. And again, just kind of a summary slide of some of the clinical responsibilities. Our panelists touched on all of these, so I won't belabor the point further.
And then here's just some points about administrative responsibilities. So they've discussed, scheduling the rotations and the different call schedules. Rosemary mentioned the evaluations or surveys to try to better the program and kind of get more of a feel for what people would like for changes. Managing program logistics was kind of talked about already, and then educational activities, grand rounds, or even just simply breakfast with the program director. And then this was the last point was touched on, people have children and people have medical issues that come up. And so that can be, 3 to 6 months sometimes. So you have to handle emergency scheduling changes. And that's a pretty significant shift in the schedule. So the chiefs are usually responsible for that.
Then here's some teaching roles and duties. So a lot of times the chiefs are also seen as, the most senior leader of the team. So educational conferences, like our panelists touched on, planning all of those. And then, serving the important duty of making sure the residency program is receiving their proper amounts of education, coordinating didactic sessions, bringing in speakers, and then serving as assistants in the classroom or with learners of various stages, as well as some programs will also have them take on the responsibilities of being teaching faculty.
And then just to kind of summarize other roles and responsibilities. So this has been hit on like the LEAs, you're the center between, you're the central person of contact between the residents and the program leadership. You're a very important piece because you can't just go from manager to, you have to have someone in the middle to convey the message properly. So that's what the chief resident does. You serve as a role model. The chief resident needs to be, you're the role model of that program, and most residents will kind of seek what the chief is doing and they kind of try to model that. Mentoring and supporting other residents has been heavily discussed. And then, they might serve on institutional committees or different hospital committees outside of the department even. And then, they go to a lot of meetings they mentioned, and some of them are leadership meetings, and then they resolve conflict and foster a positive team dynamic within the program. And that's obviously a quite difficult thing to do. So that's a challenging skill to learn. And it'd be good to learn that skill for your future and your job. And then coordinating the recruitment and selection for the program of the residency applicants. So it's a big undertaking, and it takes a lot of people to recruit people. It takes a lot of people to interview and to select appropriate candidates. So you need multiple people, and the chief facilitates a lot of this. And other pieces, obviously the coordinator and whatnot, but the chief has a pretty heavy hand in it.
Right. So our next question is, what are the required skills and characteristics of a chief resident? So we'll switch it up this time and start with Dr. Martino.
Great. So I think there's the obvious, like, all right, are you able to manage your time well? Are you able to respond to emails in a timely manner? Are you present? organizational skills. There's some like obvious like soft skills as well. Like, do you get along with people? Can you have a professional conversation? Things like that. But I think, one thing as well, you really need to be able to, you need to know yourself really well as too, so that you can approach situations, because you're going to be hit with a lot of random stuff and interesting scenarios that come up. Like you can never predict like what's going to happen or what you're going to be facing. So you need to know, all right, how do I work under pressure? How do I, you know, handle situations where people's emotions are high or things that are maybe uncomfortable? You need to be able to do that. Like I said, I'm pretty introverted. I have kind of a people-pleasing tendency. You need to be able to have those hard conversations and be able to say, listen, you know, I want to get along with everybody. I want to, make everybody happy, but realizing that's not going to happen and realizing, hey, I need to be able to be firm and, stand up for what I think is the correct thing to do in this situation, is so important. So know yourself, know what you can handle, what you can't. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that's like a really big deal. Is just being comfortable standing up to, everybody, even if it's faculty, even if it's other residents, because you're not going to make everybody happy. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Dr. Smith, any other additional skills required or characteristics that you would add?
That was pretty darn great. The obvious, know how to communicate to different kinds of people. Not everybody's going to have the same communication style. Not everyone's going to have the same feedback style, both in how they're going to give it to you or how they want to receive it from you. And so learning how to ask those kinds of things early on, I think can really help out in this role. So communication, listening is a massive part of it. That goes for any, just that's residency in general and life in general, but I think that's, a thing to have in here. Lots of patience and just kind of understanding that nothing happens, overnight, and you might have all these really great ideas and you might have a really clear cut way of how it's going to happen, but there's always some sort of extra one or two parties that have to review something for some reason in order for stuff to actually be implemented. So just being patient, understanding the process, feeling confident enough to challenge the process, whatever process that is. And, but also at the same time having a lot of humility, because we are learners. I'm only a third year, and so like family medicine residency is only 3 years. There's other residency programs that are many more years, and so if I were in a different specialty and I was maybe a fifth year or something, like I'd have more experience at my hospital and I might understand things a little bit better. And so I think having a really good sense of humility is a good one. And then knowing how to maintain confidentiality, I think, is a really important thing too, because you learn a lot of information, obviously, about your program, about your hospital system, and you learn a lot about your co-residents that you need to make sure that you're respecting and handling in a professional manner. And so I think those are all things that might not have been prior experiences necessarily in other leadership roles, that I've been grateful to learn through and hopefully, show that I can do.
Thank you both. That's very, very thorough. And you can see here just some required skills and characteristics that were both touched upon by our panelists. Obviously, leadership, I think, is a big one, a pretty obvious one, but some of the ones that I feel like people don't really always think about are those interpersonal relationship building skills. The accountability is obviously there. Communication, I feel like, is huge. And then conflict management, time management, balancing, being a chief with life and work and patient care, while also staying professional and organized, I think kind of all pair really well together.
Okay, so what are the pathways to becoming a chief resident? And I think these can be different at different programs. So we can start with Dr. Mateno and then we can get Dr. Smith's take on that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is different at every program, even different programs within the same specialty. So specifically at our program, we have relatively small class sizes. We have 4 people per class. So essentially, during your third year, I think is it January, February, the program director will ask for people to apply. The third year class to apply if you're interested in wanting to be chief. So you submit like a little write-up, letter of intent, explaining why you want to be chief and what you think you can bring to the program. And from there, so the program director, at least at our institution, will take that and bring that to our residency education council, as well as the current chief residents. And current chief residents are felt to have that kind of you know, uh, the ear of the other residents. And so they are there to provide input from how they've seen, oh, okay, these applicants, how do they interact with the other residents? Do they get along? Do they trust them? And so they all kind of make that decision together as to who will be chief. I think, other programs, some people will vote, residents will vote, there are many different ways to do it. For us, it's just a matter of the faculty and the education council discussing and choosing who they want to work with.
Yeah, ours is kind of similar. We don't have like a direct path. There's no requirements you have to do like first or second year, but partway through second year, kind of towards the end of winter, our program director will be like, hey, who wants to do this? And we have a class size of 8 people. And so those of us who want to, pursue either administrative or academic chief, we throw our, names out there and we include just a 1-page hey, this is why I want to be chief and this is what I think I want to do with it. That is shared then with the faculty and the residents. And then ultimately for administrative chief, the faculty and residents will vote based off of those submitted applications. For academic chief, the person who's responsible for our didactics, they submit there tends to be fewer people that want to do that than the administrative. And so they just submit like a 1 to 2 paragraph thing of why they want to be academic. And then the program director chooses based off of those who apply. But for my year, there were only 2 of us that wanted to do it, which I think from early on, there was another co-resident in my class who was calling me chief from our first week when we were still in orientation. They're like, you give off those vibes. And I'm like, thank you, I will. And so you can kind of tell the leadership development throughout, the years. And it's kind of fun to see, my second years now and guess who I might, who might be applying and just kind of seeing the growth of just being involved. I think that's kind of the biggest thing is you want to show that you're involved and you're invested before you even send that application.
Awesome, thank you. So here's a couple points on the different pathways to becoming chief resident, and application and interview process was touched upon, and then we've discussed interpersonal communication and leadership skills that you need to have as chief, and you need to demonstrate those maybe during your interview if you're able. Kind of explain how you can achieve this and the different clinical duties, and you got to be a good team player. So some programs have an appointment procedure that was discussed already, but not all do. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because it's dependent on where you go for training.
Alrighty, so this brings us to some time for audience questions. So we'll kind of go through these in the same way as we're going through the other questions. So starting from the top, what are the expected time commitments of a chief resident? We'll start with Dr. Martino.
So, so there were 2 chiefs who were in charge of all the things in my year. So essentially, we had a weekly meeting with our program director and program coordinator and all the assistant program directors to check in. So that was like one meeting we were guaranteed to have every week. On top of that, you're kind of, I don't want to say you're on call all day, every day, but you are kind of. You're sort of you're like first contact for a lot of people. So you're kind of, you're going to be approached all day, every day for a lot of stuff. So you have to set up really good boundaries. That's a really important skill, actually, I should have said before. But on top of that, there's going to be things outside of work you have to just attend. You have to attend recruitment events. You will have to attend, if there's like leadership workshops, or for us, because we're laboratory based, quality assurance meetings. All the various meetings. There could be many. But it's doable. You just have to be ready for it. But yeah, I know.
Great. Dr. Smith?
Yeah, it's kind of all the time. I knew that going into it, and I was okay with it because I had a plan as to how to ensure that I still was able to have good work-life balance. So I changed the ringtones for all of my co-residents, my attendings, like anybody associated with work. I changed it to the Kim Possible, what's the sitch little ringtone, because then I knew that if my phone was going off, if I was in the middle of dinner or something, I knew that is that work related or is that not work related? Like, do I need to respond to that or do I not need to? It was kind of a way to triage things a little bit. So that was very helpful. It also made it helpful if I'm getting a text at like 5:30, someone saying that they're sick and they're not coming in. Hearing that sound was a little bit more positive than the other more alarming ringtones that there could be. And so kind of, yeah, I think like it's really important. Like it really is a 24/7, 365 job. But my co-chief and I have strictly established like when she's on vacation, I am handling everything. Like, and all of my co-residents know because we've communicated to them, you are not allowed to reach out to that person when they're on vacation. Like that is their time to decompress and not do work. And then same with me, when I'm off, I'm off. We're just very intentional about protecting our time because we know otherwise we're kind of always available. But yeah, and then the meetings and stuff tend to get, scheduled out pretty far in advance. So we're aware of them. We do get administrative time explicitly for chief stuff. I get admin time as a third year with inbox management and stuff occasionally. Not very often, but occasionally. But I also get chief admin time, which is really nice to be able to dedicate. It's never enough time. There's always more work that I have to do outside of work hours, but I appreciate that they've carved out that time in my schedule for at least something.
Thank you. We can go to one of the chat questions. I guess starting with, either one of you, what's your, favorite part or what's been the most exciting part about being chief resident? If you can think on your toes, I guess.
I was just typing that out. I have it as I was about to respond to it. Basically, it's just like the advocacy exercise that we get to, do every single day on behalf of our co-residents, but also our patients a little bit. So we can like improve clinic workflow and hospital quality and stuff like that. But really just like leaving the mark on the program. We got rid of 24-hour shifts. I'm working on our transitions for like our continuity patients and stuff from, graduating third years to our rising second years. To make that just a little bit better. I consider my program is very well developed. Like I feel, I'm very fortunate and that there's not a whole lot that I have to complain about, but we're always able to find stuff to complain about. Everybody is, no matter where you are. And so it's cool to get to be part of that change. I get frustrated in things when I'm not able to contribute to making it better. I don't like to be stagnant. And so it really just, while it's more work, it certainly is very rewarding.
Yeah, I have to say ditto on all of that. I think, at least in my year, we were able to sort of establish a lot of things that we were really proud of. Like, we were able to create like a huge, ginormous, many 100-page call manual for all the lab things that can come up. We brought back in-person didactics, and we felt, and, we tried to establish additional like teaching sessions and opportunities. And I think, yeah, my favorite part was honestly just getting to influence the program in a way that I had wished that I had, like things that I wish I had as a junior resident. And I think for me, that was like the best, most rewarding part. So.
Awesome. So then the next question on our list is how can you stand out among other qualified applicants and candidates when you're applying for chief?
I think intentionality is kind of it. Like really like what are you looking to get out of this and like being honest about that. Because I think everyone understands that you're going to put in a lot of effort, but they also want to make sure that you're going to receive as much as you put in. And I think that's a really important thing to have as far as an approach to anything you do in life, but also in residency, because time is not always, under your most greatest control. And so I appreciated that when I asked my program director like what he was looking for in that letter. It's like he's like, well, what are you gonna get out of it? Like, be honest with us, and like why do you want this? And so I think just really reflecting on that and figuring out how that's going to benefit, your future. But also like why that kind of like circles back and like how you can specifically, contribute to the program. It's kind of it's definitely a two-way street. And I like that my program really wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's like a very big deal, like they want to know about your deliverables, other than like, yeah, we're gonna keep the vibes nice in the program. Like, yeah, that's important, but what is it that, you're gonna bring? What sort of change do you want to affect, or what sort of things are you interested in doing? I think a way to stand out. I mean, a lot of it comes back to, because like at least, depending on how your program selects chiefs, a lot of it is what is your relationship with your co-residents and what is your relationship with your faculty? If you from the jump are somebody who is not teachable or very difficult to work with, or, you get into a lot of arguments, you can say like you might not be a desirable candidate for chief if, your social interactions are perhaps not super smooth. um, I think honestly, coming in though and being engaged academically as well, I think that's a big deal because it's such a lot. It's such a huge responsibility, and you have to be in a good academic standing already to take this on top of everything else. So I think you need to be engaged from the jump. You have to, work well with others. You have to demonstrate the skills that we say that you need to have you should have to be chief. You need to establish that pattern of behavior early on. So that way, when they're discussing like, okay, who do we want to represent us? There is like patterns of behavior they can draw on, because anyone can publish like a bajillion papers, but does that make you a good chief resident? Does that make you somebody that somebody trusts with their life for the next year? That's a totally different thing. So you want to demonstrate that you are that type of person who can be a good advocate for your co-residents and a good working relationship with your faculty.
All right, so what do you think the best way is to enhance your chance of becoming chief kind of as you transition from your second year to your third year? And anyone can start if you have it on the top of your mind already.
I mean, I think we kind of just touched on it too, of just like show that you can do it, like I think it's kind of more of like are you capable of managing this on top of your other responsibilities? So like being engaged and being part of any of the, workforces or like any like interest groups that your program has, and being not just like part of them, but like being engaged with them and contributing to them. Joining the little committees that, might be focusing on, one little project for your program or something. I think quality improvement stuff is a really great way to do that as well. It's a requirement for graduation from residency. And so it's a little too for there, but being really, intentional about those and maybe doing them in a couple different ways. But I think also just literally voicing it early on. I'm a huge advocate for like, if there's something that you want, like it's almost kind of like a little manifesto kind of thing. Like tell people, like introduce yourself, like, hey, I'm Cassie. I think I want to be chief when I'm a third year. You know what I mean? Like get it out there, start, telling people. And that way, when they're observing you, they can give you that feedback or they can reflect on those positive qualities that you already have. And so that way they can kind of observe your growth, whether that's immediately from first year or even like from second to third year. Just that way they can specifically be observing those things and they know that that's kind of an intention of yours, so they can kind of draw those two things together. So when they're reviewing things, it's much easier for them to remember those specific moments where they already experienced you maybe demonstrating good leadership and commitment to your program.
Yeah, 100%. All of those things. I think one of the big things that, they mentioned when, we're discussing choosing the next chiefs after us was, well, what are they doing? Like what have they done so far? So we're chief resident in our fourth year. So it's like, okay, over the last, 2.5 years or so, like what have these applicants done? Have they shown any interest in the program, or are they just kind of coming in every day and then leaving immediately? Like, how are they working? So I think, yeah, definitely, as was said, like any kind of QI projects, any kind of, education committees or other types of little things you can do, like just show that you care about your program.
Some love that.
So the next question I'm going to touch on, you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but have you genuinely showed interest if you want to? I'll leave it to whoever has thoughts and kind of their head.
Sorry, by like audio cut out. Are we, could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. I was saying that the question, how can you genuinely show interest that you want to
Oh.
be president? Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, like what was it for you? Like you can just say it, like, hey, like this, I'm really interested in leadership. I think, yeah, just like kind of what we said before is just showing you are engaged, showing that you're participating. Yeah. And also you could, engage with your current chiefs, like see what they're doing, see how they do things and like what sort of decisions they're making, ask about their life, just to show that you are actually trying to get a realistic view of what the role is, because you want to make sure you're going into it for the correct reasons and you want to demonstrate that you understand what a big commitment it is.
I don't really have a whole lot to add, but my biggest recommendation as far as committees is like get involved in your program evaluation committee. Every residency program is required to have that, so you have one. Some are more engaged than others, but that is a great way to have, more one-on-one time with your program director and the other people who are also interested in leadership and change.
Awesome. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but well, we have another question here. So, we'll start with the question in the chat and then we'll close off with the final question on the slide because I feel like that's a good question to end on. So, starting with the question in the chat, what are some of the best lessons you have learned from being a chief resident? I don't know if Rosemary, you want to start with that or
Sure.
need a second to think about it.
I think so. A couple huge things I learned as chief is that one, you need to be really good at establishing healthy boundaries. And two, pick your battles. Like, you are not going to be able to like accomplish every single thing on your bucket list for chief year or even just like in life in general. Pick your battles. And yeah, just like I think honestly it was such a good experience. I learned so much about myself as well as what it's like to be, in a kind of administrative role. And I think just, you know, just take everything you can from every experience you have. So
I'm continuing to kind of just learn this in life too, but just like always ask more questions. I think something that I got frustrated with, I feel like everyone kind of starts getting comfortable at the end of first year. And so then everyone starts challenging everything, which is great. I love it. I'm looking forward to it. And that's when I kind of started being like, well, why don't we have this? Why can't we do that? Like all these different things. And it took like a year to get back to me on like certain responses or updates or reasons why. And I was so frustrated in that and like so hung up on it. And as a chief, I have learned like, I think I alluded to it earlier as well, of like there's always some sort of other party that something has to go through because that is healthcare in America for some reason. And like there's always some sort of extra step that usually we just don't understand, and I know that I don't even still as a chief and won't necessarily always understand it until I get higher up in leadership things on things. But like I think just like the patience and like just because I'm not immediately getting, responses or changes happening doesn't mean that there isn't something going on in order to contribute to that. And so having the patience and grace to like allow the time for something to come to fruition, while also still being stubborn enough to make sure that it's still happening, but doing so in a professional and classy way. So yeah, and I think it's something that I can definitely apply to my career, but also my life. And that's been a really good thing.
That's awesome. I think that transitions pretty well into our final question for the night. And so what is the best piece of advice you have for someone interested in becoming chief president? And so we'll bounce back with Dr. Martino for the final piece of advice.
Oh boy. I mean, honestly, it's figure out. I'm going to go back. It's like know yourself. Like know how you communicate, know what it is you want from this situation. Understand like, all right, how do I react in these situations? And understand that other people may not react the same way. It's like know yourself before going into it and go into it with your eyes totally open and get as much information as you can. So that way you're always going to be surprised by something weird. But, you know, just go into it with as much information as you can and with the idea that you're going to learn a ton. Um, and yeah, just good luck.
Awesome. And then Dr. Smith.
Definitely just approaching everything from a place of inquiry and like genuinely just trying to understand why something currently is happening the way it's happening. And then being able to explain why you want to change it. But I think more importantly, get a coach, get a chief coach. That is somebody who is maybe within your hospital system, but not faculty on your program. My prior chiefs had their like coach, their chief advisor be someone that was on our faculty. And I was like, that's the last person that I want to talk to if I'm struggling with something, because they already know I'm struggling with it. And clearly we're not getting anywhere with that. And so we are working with one of our palliative care doctors that my co-chief and I just love working with when we're on those rotations or when we're on inpatient service and consulting. But like she was also a chief when she was in residency, and she's been like a life coach and leadership coach for other people. So she has experience with that. But truly just like having somebody that you can meet with that's an outside perspective, but still understands sort of what you're going through. So you can bounce ideas off of and just get, it's like a different resource for feedback. And it has been so helpful in like be feeling supported and valued and motivated. And like, I feel encouraged by her to, just continue to pursue this. And I think that's something that's really sustaining me, but also the boundaries, like I said earlier, you got to set strong boundaries, and stand by them. Do not be like, oh, just this one time. No, never. Boundaries, they don't move. Take care of yourself.
That's wonderful.
I love that. Yeah, that was funny. Oh, that was really great session. So, we've reached the end here. We've asked lots of great questions, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank the panelists, Dr. Mateo and Dr. Smith, for their great answers and helping guide all the guide everyone and give advice to all who joined us. And as a reminder, we do record these. So this webinar will be posted on the AOGME webpage within 7 days. The webpage link is posted in the chat. You'll see it shortly. And, if you visit this webpage to register for our upcoming webinars, and you can view recordings of our previous webinars, we've done it on tons of topics. We get really great responses. So I think that's a great resource to have. And if you have any further questions, you can always email us at aogme@aacom.org. And thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.